All right, let's just jump right in. What if our entire understanding of cosmic history, our whole concept of deep time, was based on a single, flawed assumption? Today, we're diving into a source that conducts nothing less than a forensic audit of time itself. And believe me, the findings present a radical challenge to how we see everything.
So, at the very heart of this audit is one huge, provocative question. Is the universe's 13.8 billion year timeline a hard fact? Or is it just a massive mathematical guess, a projection based on what our source calls a broken yardstick? We're about to look at two completely different operating systems for reality itself.
On one side, you've got this standard story, the uniformitarian model. This is the idea of a slow, grinding, bottom-up history unfolding over billions of years, basically a machine that built itself. But on the other side, we have the initialization model. This posits a universe created top-down, fully formed and functional just 5,786 years ago. Not a machine, but a message that was spoken into existence.
To help us understand the standard model, our source introduces us to a character, the inspector. Now, this inspector represents a scientific approach that relies on one incredibly powerful, but maybe deeply flawed tool for guessing about the past, and that tool is called extrapolation. So what exactly is extrapolation? Well, imagine you walk into a kitchen and find a pot of cooling water. You measure it, see it's cooling by 1 degree per hour, and you calculate backwards that it must have been boiling for millions of years. But here's the thing. What if the chef just turned the stove off 5 minutes ago? Extrapolation completely misses that possibility. That's the core assumption we're putting under the microscope.
And according to our source, this total reliance on extrapolation has pushed modern cosmology into a major crisis. Because when the math just doesn't add up, when galaxies are spinning so fast they should fly apart, the standard model has to invent invisible stuff like dark matter and dark energy just to make the equations balance. And let's be clear about the scale of this problem. We're talking about 95% of the universe. That's the so-called dark sector. Think about that for a second. Everything we can see, touch, and measure is only 5% of reality. The source argues this isn't an explanation. It's a colossal placeholder, calling it a metaphysical Ponzi scheme designed to keep the model afloat. From this perspective, this isn't just about math anymore. It's a philosophical choice. The dark sector is framed as a kind of refusal to even consider another possibility, that there's an architect actively holding the entire system together. And recent discoveries are pouring gasoline on this fire. You've all seen the amazing images from the James Webb Space Telescope, right? Well, it keeps finding these massive, fully formed red monster galaxies at the supposed dawn of time, where we should be seeing tiny, primitive baby galaxies. This maturity crisis is a direct punch to the gut of the slow, gradual growth model. And this exact same conflict comes right down to earth when we look at geology. The inspector sees the layers of the Grand Canyon and assumes gentle, slow deposition over eons. But the alternative view sees evidence of a rapid, violent, catastrophic event, a hard reset, that laid down those layers almost all at once. The core argument is that the standard model is mistaking the evidence of violence for the passage of time. This brings us right back to the central claim of the second model. Instead of a universe that had to grow up from infancy, this model says the universe was created fully formed, operational, and adult from the very first moment. And this principle has a name: functional maturity. Functional maturity. It means the system was built ready to run from day one. In this view, the first human was created as an adult, not an embryo. The first trees were created with rings, not as little seeds. And the light from the most distant stars? It was created already in transit, filling the cosmos, making the entire system functional from the get-go. Okay, so this is the obvious question, isn't it? If it's young, why does it have the appearance of being old? The source says this isn't some kind of deception. Instead, it's a necessary feature of reality itself, a concept known as teva. Teva, which means submersion, is the idea that the creator's direct power is hidden within the consistent, predictable laws of nature. Why? Well, think about it. If miracles were happening every second, if the author's hand was constantly visible, would you really have free will? No, you'd be compelled. So the argument is, the appearance of an old, self-sustaining system is the very thing that creates the space for us to make a genuine choice. So, if we can't trust the broken yardstick of extrapolation, what are we left with? How could we possibly know the true age of the universe? The source proposes a totally different method. It says we shouldn't measure physical decay. We should track a verified, unbroken signal transmitted through history. This signal is called the Mesorah. Now, this is where things get really fascinating. The source describes this tradition, the Mizrah, in strikingly modern terms. It's essentially a spiritual blockchain. It's anchored by a public, mass-witnessed event. Its memory is decentralized across millions of nodes or families. It uses incredibly rigorous, bit-for-bit copying protocols to prevent any data corruption, and it has a fully verifiable chain of custody. The security of this signal is the most crucial part. This wasn't a private revelation to a single individual. It was a public event for an entire nation. The source argues that you simply cannot retroactively hack that. You can't convince millions of people to start telling their children a lie about a shared, foundational experience that never happened. The memory is locked in a distributed ledger. And this secure, unbroken process transmits a very specific piece of data, a chronological coordinate, 5,786 years. According to this model, this number isn't a theory cooked up by measuring rocks. It's presented as a verified timestamp, a signal transmitted faithfully by a continuous civilization from the moment of initialization. And this brings us to the final core comparison. It's like trying to figure out how old a book is. The inspector's method is to analyze the chemical decay of the ink and guess its age. The other method, you just open the cover and read the author's copyright date. One method trusts the decay of the medium, the other trusts the author's own signal.
So ultimately, it brings us right back to those two fundamental models. Are we living inside a random self-assembling machine where our only job is to measure the gears? Or are we living inside an intentional message where our job is to actually read what the author wrote?
The source concludes that the 13.8 billion years story is a mathematical mirage, a story we can only arrive at by assuming there were no witnesses to the beginning. And it leaves us with this final, provocative thought from the book of Job. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? In other words, can we really audit a crime scene if we weren't there to see the crime? Or at some point, do we have to rely on a witness?